Hello again, Dr. Mata. I decided I'd do another video again. I thought I liked the format of the last time. I think it's an interesting medium to be able to communicate, and it's a different style and something that I think is probably going to be more common to the work I'm eventually going to do. So I thought I'd take another advantage to do another video. I'm I was actually pretty interested in this week's assignment. I've actually been enjoying the material in general, but these particular disorders that we were learning about, between anxiety disorders, OCD, and depression, were all things that kind of caught my attention. And things that I'll probably eventually get involved in quite a bit. I thought I knew more about OCD than I really did as I got to the material. And I chose to watch the movie The Aviator, where the character Howard Hughes suffers from OCD, and and can see it in a lot of different ways. And one of the things that really caught my attention is, since OCD is kind of one of those things that have really caught I guess the common vernacular of the American people, at least, and so I thought I had a pretty good understanding of it, and I really did, and it was pretty superficial. Um, and I think I'm getting a much better idea now. So, like I said, I watched the movie The Aviator, and that was kind of the focus that I wanted to talk about here. So Howard Hughes, who was the main character in the movie, I diagnosed him with OCD. And the reason for that was two things. So one of the things that I learned as I was reading DSM is that, so to be diagnosed with OCD, you have to have both obsessions and compulsions. And some of the obsessions that Howard Hughes has, so I'll start with his obsessions. So the main thing was, I think, the one that kind of brought up most of the compulsion and most of the issues, was his issues with germs, disease. The movie itself starts off with a scene where his mother is washing him, cleansing him, talking about germs and disease, and having to be careful where he goes and what he does. And then as the movie progresses, you slowly see him, um, over time, develop certain tendencies. But that was definitely the theme, was these germs, and trying to avoid interacting or putting himself in a place where that would be dangerous. I think the reason at the very beginning of the movie, the reason he left Texas was because he was claiming there was disease and all sorts of health issues there that he had to get away from. So he moved to California. Um, so that was one of the themes that that kind of came off. The other thing that I found of obsessions, and I don't know if I call it the same kind of categories as an obsession as the germs was, but certainly something that's common within those who have OCD, and certainly you saw that with this character in Howard Hughes, was the perfectionist mentality. And there were some obsessions. One, like planes, for example, was a big obsession within, but also this perfectionist mentality, where there was times where he kept having them redo planes, redo planes. It doesn't even matter how many times they did to redo it, until he thought it was perfect. There was that scene where he was looking at it, and there was a bunch of rivets, or on the plane, and he wanted it flush and clean, so he had to make him redo it again. So the idea that everything had to be perfect, it was obsessive. It didn't matter how many times it had to be done, but it was constant. Another example, with the planes, was the plane that he had a government contract for, with the Hercules, and that plane took too long to take, because he continued to want perfection, and eventually cost him a lot of money, because he was never able to sell that, or never able to actually come through on that contract with the government, because it took too long. Um, there was another example with the movies that he was doing. So the whole beginning of the movie is about this movie he's making, called Hell's Angels, where it took him 4 years to do that project, and it took about 2 years just to get it done. It was ready to go, and then he came across a new medium with sound, and he decided he had to reshoot the whole thing. So again, driving force that perfectionist mentality. Um, those perfectionist mentality, and those obsessions, specifically the germs, and disease, ultimately led to some compulsion activities. Hand washing was one that was demonstrated throughout the movie. Um, certainly a pattern. He would use his fingers, and he had a certain ritual on how he did the hand washing. He had to bring his own soap. He couldn't use anybody else's soap. And it was consistent. And there's even a scene where he actually bled because he was washing his hands so long, to kind of demonstrate the length of time that it was taking for him to go through his ritual. One of the things that has to, so you have to have like at least an hour-long ritual for these compulsions as well. And so, although the movie can't do an hour-long thing, but I think it was demonstrating that it was there. There was other examples of compulsions, the repeating of statements, so not quite stuttering, but I'm trying to remember the lines now, but like, this is the future, this is the future, this is the future, saying it over and over and over again. He had that a couple times. The other thing I thought was interesting, and this is something you'll find, what I found when I was reading through the material, was that OCD is gradual. So as he suffered further and further and wasn't getting treatment for it, his symptoms began to become bigger and bigger and more significant. And that was so, like, the repeating of statements was a good example where that really wasn't much of an issue at the beginning. But by the end of the movie, that was a really big symptom that was common for him. And then another example was where he was near the end of the movie, or kind of like 2/3 through. He was talking about he kind of sealed himself away from everything, and was talking about having to open milk, and there was only a certain way to do it. And so he had to, like, open it with his left hand, put the cap in his right hand, and put it in his pocket. And there was kind of a ritual process where he had to do it the same way every single time in order to prevent from getting sick or ill, for whatever reason, to try and avoid germs. And then it kind of went further, where you saw some efforts to really kind of make it a clean zone, a safe zone. I think there was a time where, near the end of the movie, where he was a girl he had dated came to help him, and he didn't want her to leave after she got into the clean zone because he was afraid of the contamination. And so there's a few other things. One other aspect of that was, there were some dysfunctional beliefs. Although not a requirement to be diagnosed as OCD, certainly it's a key aspect within the compulsion and the obsessions. It's pretty common. In fact, Howard, I think, even knew that he was delusional a little bit. There was a scene where he was talking to Katharine Hepburn and his girlfriend, and he talked about how he was losing his mind, and he would get these thoughts that he didn't know how to get rid of, and he was going crazy, and so he kind of knew that was coming on. And there's some variation within DSM that talks about how every client's a little bit different. Some kind of know that they're going out, losing their mind, and some don't. And in his case, it looked like he was aware. There's also some, as I was going through this, so that's kind of why I thought it was OCD, or why I diagnosed it as OCD. There are some things I had to take into consideration, like an anxiety disorder. I ruled that out. One, largely because of the fact that the compulsion was pretty significant, but the anxiety disorder usually is about real life concerns, and not something that's kind of a little more out there, like Howard's was, where he was a little bit more, I don't want to say magical, but kind of just distant. And anxiety disorder is something about a little more real, more common, normal, although just exasperated by their anxiety. So I didn't think it was anxiety disorder. The other thing that I considered was substance abuse, and that didn't make sense since Howard really didn't drink much. That was a point of the movie. I didn't see him smoke at all, and I didn't hear him reference whether he smoked or not, but my impression was that he didn't. And so the idea that he was involved in any kind of other substance abuse, which was not portrayed in the movie at all, didn't make sense. So I didn't see any substance abuse, or even like just medication that might have been distorting his thoughts. So that didn't seem like a realistic thing. And then the third one was a major depressive disorder. And that was ruled out just because depressive disorder is not linked to compulsion. So the compulsions that you're seeing with Howard and the rituals that he was going through aren't connected to depressive disorder. So that didn't make sense either. So that's why I ultimately landed on the OCD, obsessive compulsive disorder. In my research, I kind of looked through and tried to figure out the different treatment options that you can use to treat OCD. So for a psychopharmacological, if I say that right, psychopharmacological treatment, I hope I said that right. So that treatment, that's really just using medication to try and adjust your serotonin and to a level that's a proper balance. I think it's called the drug is called the most common one that's used, at least at the moment, is a serotoninogenic. I'm not sure if I'm saying that right. Reuptake inhibitor, a CRI. The studies show that it's mildly effective. It reduces symptoms within about half of the people that take of it. So it's okay. What it doesn't do is it doesn't eradicate or eliminate the OCD. So that's still there, but it just reduces the symptoms a little bit and allows the patient or the client to be able to get more control over their life. So there's some advantages to it, since like I said, it does work. It does reduce some of the symptoms and it allows you to have control. And it's just by taking some medication, but it's not remarkably effective. And on top of that, there's a high relapse rate with that particular drug, falling back into some of the OCD patterns. So it's something that I wouldn't be opposed to using, but not probably on its own. Another treatment option was a psychological treatment. The one I came across that is probably the most common treatment that people use is the ERB, or ERP, the exposure and response prevention. And this is something that was created back in the 1970s, where the idea is you're meant to take a client who suffers from OCD and find whatever their anxiety or fear is regarding, and to slowly and gradually introduce them into that fear, with the idea that by giving them more exposure to it, it will help them realize that they're being irrational. And then on top of that, you're also taking steps to prevent them from going through their ritual that that the client uses to negate any kind of exposure that they may have gone through, or because what's the word I'm looking for? Cross each other out. So if they've been exposed to something, they'll do the ritual to save themselves or help themselves. So that's just the program. So in this program, like I said, it's something that will slowly, gradually, and it's kind of done at the patient or client's pace. So it's not forced upon, and it's actually really effective. It's one of the most effective methods of treating OCD. OCD used to be back a long time ago a disorder that was very difficult to treat, and has since, with this particular practice in particular, become fairly common and fairly effective measure. I think 70% of the people that take the ERP method are able to find much improved from their condition, and on top of that, it's actually highly successful in terms of a relapse rate, where it's a low relapse rate. So it usually takes between 15 and 20 exposure settings, and those exposure settings are anywhere from daily to weekly meetings that you're having with the client and patient, and as you're slowly introducing them to their issues. There is a downside to this particular method, though, especially for those that might be severe OCD I guess they're suffering severely from OCD, and that is that it may require 24-hour watch while they're going through the treatment of the ERP, because it's important for the client and the patient to not go through their ritual, and so you need somebody there that's going to be regularly with them to make sure that they're not going through the ritual, that they know they can be exposed to these things and not have to do the ritual and still be safe, which is one of the core parts of the whole treatment. There's another treatment that I came across for a family therapy-based treatment, and that was cognitive therapy. And I was actually really surprised as I was going through all the material this past week. Cognitive therapy was a common theme that kind of went through all the different disorders that we were reading through, specifically anxiety and OCD, and there was really effective against those particular disorders. And in this case, so cognitive therapy, it's where you're trying to teach a person that that the rationale behind their behavior and their thinking is illogical. It doesn't make sense. And to try and introduce some ways. So one of the treatment, or the way the treatment I guess works is it's kind of using well, the one I read was like Socratic terms, but to me it's just using logic, kind of slowly using some key questions, slowly guiding the client along to help them understand that their rationale and their justification for their actions don't make sense. So one example was that I was reading in the material was how there's a client that suffers from a fear of their house burning down. So they kind of went through each step of what it would take for that to actually happen, and then kind of putting a percentage of what's the percent of chance of each of these particular cases, and actually doing the math and showing the real legitimate or reasonable chance that this is actually going to happen to help. With Howard's case, if I was to be treating this person, I probably would have taken through, so what are you worried about getting sick with, and how do you think that even got there, to wherever he is, what kind of illness you think he even got there, what are the chances that you get it and nobody else gets it, what are the chances that somebody else doesn't know how to treat it if you've got it. Oh, sorry. And just kind of slowly going, getting a percentage each time from Howard and trying to understand what his rationale is, and then ultimately doing the math and showing him where that lands. You can also use a pie chart. I think was also an example where you're going through and just so it's visual, so you can kind of see some of the reasons. There's lots of probably ways you can do it, but the idea is that you're helping them come to the realization that their rationale is not correct. And this actually has another highly effective tool that's used, again, a highly effective tool that's used for OCD. It's just about as effective as the ERP method. And this is actually a great method if the ERP method is not working for the client because the client is just too stressed about dealing with their fears. So a lot of people will come back to this method because it's also very effective, and that way they don't have to actually face their fears. They can work through the rationale and work and try and work through the issue. Another common thing is actually to combine the two methods of ERP and cognitive therapy, which has shown some really significant benefits as well, and even more effective than each of them on their own. And it has a great, like I said, high success rate, and it's a low relapse rate as well. The last method that I was looking at for a biomedical treatment, I'm going to be honest, I looked through all the material and I could not find a specific biomedical treatment that I thought worked in this particular case. And to be honest, I could not differentiate the difference between biomedical and psychopharmacological. So the only thing I could determine, my best guess that I was able to kind of come to with is that a biomedical is more about trying to balance the chemicals and the minerals inside you to hopefully reduce some of the symptoms, similar to the psychopharmacological, but it's I guess more broader than that. So not just with like medication, but trying to use things to, like I said, to balance your overall minerals and things. There was also an option that I was looking at, which was electroconvulsive therapy. I think that's biomedical treatment. I did not see that as a method for OCD, nor do I see that as a common treatment in general anymore. It was something that was more popular back a number of years ago, but medication has usually replaced that. So unfortunately, I could not find anything on that, and I look forward to kind of getting some more clarification, because I wish I understood that better. And like I said, I looked for hours on those things. Anyways, so that's what I was able to find. I think the most effective method, what I would probably recommend, is using a cognitive therapy and the ERP together. I would probably start with the ERP. That is my personal style. I think that's the most effective measure. I haven't seen any studies done where you maybe use the 3 medication and those 2 methods of ERP and cognitive therapy, but that might be something to consider as well. But if it's so effective without using the medication, I don't know if it makes sense to do that. Anyway, so I hope that resolves everything, or answers all the questions that I was supposed to do, and look forward to your thoughts, and I'll talk to you later.